Hello, everyone. Sorry, but that's not the intro. Hello, Janksters, and welcome to another edition of the MagicJank podcast, the show where members of Team MagicJank get together and we talk about stuff that's happening in Magic. And we are just after we actually just concluded this past weekend the Lorwyn Eclipsed Pro Tour. So we have thoughts and feelings about Standard specifically. And I'm not alone. I'm joined by the one and only CarloMTG. Carlo, how's it going, man? How are we feeling?
Oh, it's good. It's good. It's been busy, but I am happy to be back to yap about Standard. And yeah, Pro Tour was just this past weekend. Lots of different decks, folks. Lots of different decks. We're gonna get into that. Uh, but yeah, just everything's been good. Been good. It's been a good kind of busy, and it's also been really
Excellent.
cold. So you know.
It's definitely been that. Actually, I walked out the other day and it was like 20 degrees, and I had a thought, like 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and I actually had the question, do I need a jacket? Because it was so much warmer than it has been. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, I'm
good
prepping to
stuff.
go on my first trip to Toronto for Spotlight Eclipse. That's coming up this weekend, which is Lorwyn Eclipsed Limited, which I've been really enjoying playing, both draft and sealed practice. And
Heck yeah.
I'm like, man, if it's been this cold here in New Jersey, I can only imagine the temperature in Toronto. And so I'm like, should I bring gloves? I'm like not a gloves wearing guy, but I'm pretty sure
It's
I
it's
should
probably a good
have
idea.
gloves there. Yeah.
I'd recommend it. Yeah, at least
Yeah,
have the
yeah.
option. At least keep them in the pocket just in case, because you never
Right,
know.
right.
Yeah, yeah. Woof. Yeah, bundle up. Yeah, stay warm, and hopefully you get a fun elemental package in the in your
Oh
seal pool,
yeah.
because like that's just good times, right?
Hmm.
As we saw in the Pro Tour. So obviously draft is what it is, and limited is what it is. But in the constructed environment, there were a ton. Like in standard at the Pro Tour, there were a ton of elemental decks represented in various
Oh yeah.
flavors. So while that gives me an excuse for a ham-fisted transition, I also just have to ask your thoughts on what were some of the favorite decks that you saw. Like, where do we want to start when we're really looking at this whole metagame? Because there's a ton of
Yeah.
stuff. There's no one standout like we've seen in the past. You know?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not going to claim to be non-biased here. Um, I very much so was rooting for the Jeskai control player, Marco Balacca, not just because he's also Italian, but you know, he understood exactly the assignment. And it's, I like sometimes when I feel justified in my opinions on like what decks are good in standard, right? I think we both kind of get this criticism, like being some people who stream the game, but we might not necessarily be in the competitive circuit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in one form or another. And I have been playing Jeskai Control for weeks. Like I took the deck pre Lorwyn Eclipse, the Spotlight Series Atlanta. I've been playing it all RCQ season long.
Hmm.
And Marco Balacca's list is only a couple cards different than what I've been playing, both sideboard
Nice.
cards and main deck choices. And I'm like, I know that this deck is good against the majority of the format. Jeskai Revelation is a hell of a card.
It's
Like,
yeah.
how it's taken this long to sort of catch on is I think as a result of the format becoming less aggressive in the sense that the mono red decks were good against Jeskai control. So I
Sure.
couldn't cast a 7 mana card against a mono red deck that was playing like Screaming Nemesis, right?
Right.
But I can when mono red doesn't exist in the format,
Heyo.
right?
Yeah.
So this is the prime example of a card that is an ultimatum at instant speed, right? Like I'm thinking of
Mm-hmm.
like, and I'm not calling this Cruel Ultimatum, but would I pay 7 mana for Cruel Ultimatum in Standard currently? No. Would I pay 7 mana for Jeskai Revelation at instant speed? 100%,
Heck
right?
yeah.
Especially when I get to do 20 things. Yeah.
Right? It's actually really interesting when you compare it to Inspired Ultimatum. I love that comparison
Mm.
because this one, like a player gains 5 life, deals 5 damage to any target, and you draw 5 cards. Okay, that is great, to be sure, but that's, 7 mana of very specific pips at sorcery speed.
Yeah.
And so, Jeskai Revelation is doing similar things. You draw fewer cards, but you also get the tokens and you get the life.
Yeah.
Like, it's doing something. It's giving you that same amount of value, but yeah, at instant speed, and it's much easier to cast.
And
So,
given the the Jeskai control deck doesn't play many creatures, I think Marco Balacca's Pro Tour list only played one Unagi of Kyoshi Island in the main deck as the only creature, which is totally fine, totally great. I love Unagi at Kyoshi Island. It's a favorite card of mine to be playing currently.
Pretty great. Yeah.
But, being able to play this Jeskai Revelation in a deck where I've got all non-creature spells, that's going to pump those prowess monks that it creates. If I can end step, if I can get to 7 mana and cast Jeskai Revelation, hopefully I win the game, right? I land the monks. The next turn, you untap, land 8 mana. Maybe I can cast 2 spells. 2 of them might be Lightning Helix, so you might just die, right?
That'll do it.
It's so nice of a card. Of course, you do have to worry about counter spells that your opponents might have and stuff like that if they are playing a deck with some type of blue splash. But the same deck literally can play a land, Mysterized Village, that makes your spells uncounterable. And what better than a control deck to wait till turn 9 to cast a spell that actually matters, right? So pay 2 extra mana, have an uncounterable Jeskai Rev, and it's super good for when you play against a control mirror match, because you're all just draw going anyway. So it's pretty sweet.
Fantastic. I love that. Yeah, and so I think counter spells have become, I don't know, given how many strong ETBs and given how much crazy ramp we have, I feel like countering stuff on the stack is like more important than ever. And so having a deck that leans into that definitely seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
Have you found, I'm curious if your build and actually the list that's in the Pro Tour, is it running any number of Spell Snare by chance?
So pre-Lorwyn Eclipsed, no. Post-Lorwyn Eclipsed, obviously, yes, right?
Right.
Didn't have access to this for Spotlight Atlanta, but Spell Snare is the perfect answer for turn 2 Badger Mole Cub, right? Which definitely, I think, before the Pro Tour, given the regional championship that happened the week before, Badger Mole Cub decks were a deck to beat, or you had to assume that there's going to be a large amount of those decks submitted. So this is a perfect counter to that card, obviously, on turn 1 for you, turn 2 for your opponent. So I can just play Island or whatever, pass, hold up the Spell Snare.
Yeah, having an answer on the draw is huge. Yeah.
It's very important, because if your opponent goes Badger Mole Cub into Badger Mole Cub, if you ain't got a Wrath, you probably lose. Right? Or if you can't at least eliminate one of them. And that's just the state of Standard we are in terms of high power level. So yeah, Spell Snare is an all-star, but Spell Snare hits a lot of other things. And we'll get into the other decks of this
100%
Pro Tour tournament, but thinking of the Elementals deck, Flame Braider, 2 mana, you got to Spell Snare that guy, because if not, your opponent's got 5 mana on turn 3. Yeah, Flame Braider, exactly. I think this is similar to Smoke Braider from original Lorwyn, right? Where you just taps for 2 mana of any combination of colors or whatever for your elemental spells. Notably, Wistfulness and Vibrance both cost 5 mana to cast. So, getting a turn 3, exile your enchantment plus draw cards is pretty good. So you need Spell Snare for that card. 2 mana, Ashling is 2 mana also. So, just thinking about that.
Yep.
Need some answers.
And Ashling saw a significant amount of play as well. Ashling Rekindled. Yeah, this card is bonkers, it turns out.
You're talking about a mini Fear of Missing Out in terms of when it enters, discard draw. You basically get to flip it the next turn and still cast a 4-drop, because when it flips, you pay 1 mana, but it makes 2 for a 4 or greater. So if you play land, you play your Roaming Throne on turn 4, which is going to double all of your elementals. So it's very fast, and it doesn't just do it when it transforms. It's at the beginning of your first main phase. It's making 2 mana also. So you go from 4 to 7 mana on the next turn, right? Because you get your land drop plus the 2 bonus mana from this. So this Ashling is very good at Rare.
This is one of those things. So Ashling Rhymebound, I didn't clock previously that you get the mana at the beginning of your first main phase when it's on the backside, no matter what. So you always, once you get the mana once, you will just have it every single turn for the remainder of the game if you pay into it to keep the flipping going. Which, what? That's actively insane. This card reminds me very much of Fable of the Mirror Breaker, in not necessarily in exactly what it does, but in how easy it is to underestimate. I didn't realize just how insanely strong this thing would be until seeing it in action this weekend and realizing like, oh,
Yeah.
wait a
I
minute.
mean,
Yeah.
listen, it's an is it card that ramps, right? Not many is it cards ramp, right? We've seen some occasional red cards ramp that sort of have broken the color pie over the last couple years. So your reference to Fable the Mirror Breaker, that was a red card that ramped, right?
Mm-hmm.
Got you the Goblin Shaman that tapped. When it became tapped, you got your treasure token. Um, this card is dangerous. And I say dangerous because the same elementals deck can play 4 copies of Cavern of Souls, making it difficult for the control decks to deal with. So,
Mm-hmm.
joke's on me if I'm holding up Spell Snare and you go Cavern Elemental, here's my 2-drop, and it's like, uh-oh, I guess I better have a removal spell now.
Right.
Um, Even in testing some matches against this deck, pre-Pro Tour and after Pro Tour, I don't think I want my counter spells in my deck at all.
Ooh.
I just want all the removal spells possible, and just to play
Hmm.
over top of the elementals. I think is the only answer, because if you can't counter what they're doing, then your counter spells become dead cards. I think another huge reason, the Jeskai decks have moved away somewhat from 3 steps ahead, which was like prime counter spell, is because of the inclusion of Spell Snare, but
Mm-hmm.
also multiple decks playing Cavern. It's not just the Elementals deck. The Boros Dragons deck plays Cavern of Souls also. So you can't even
Mm.
counter, their Momo into Nova Hellkite on turn 2. 3 steps ahead can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
No More Lies could, if you were able to cast a No More Lies, if they didn't have
Right.
Cavern of Souls. So I think you see a significant resurgence in Cavern of Souls being strong strength against a metagame where it's understood that Jeskai control or another control variant is very strong.
Mm-hmm.
I think you definitely saw that some of the pros in this event chose to play a Dimir control variant. I'm not talking
Mm-hmm.
about the Doomsday Excruciator deck, but just
Okay,
straight
sure.
up Dimir control, like Gabe Nassif was playing it and some of his teammates. I know a couple folks who went to play RCQs this weekend were playing Dimir control. It's like Cavern of Souls is literally your best answer against all of the shenanigans
Mm-hmm.
that deck's trying to do. So Got to be
Righteous.
ready with the demolition fields, which might mean we see a return more to blue-white control, so they could play a card to handle Cavern of Souls.
Mm. Demolition feel like a card that even if Foundations ever rotates someday, I'm sure they'll just reprint it again because this, yeah,
Oh yeah,
we always need this. This, yeah.
yeah,
Oh my
and
goodness.
it's interesting too, because if you think about cards like Demolition Field to blow up Cavern, the Elementals deck don't play many basics at all. Maybe they play one, maybe
Mm-hmm.
2 basic lands. So that's going to turn your Demolition Field into actual land destruction against them, which is good considering that they ramp. But they do have cards like Vibrance that just let them go search for
Yeah.
lands anyway.
Right. That was the other. Yeah, I was genuinely shocked at just how popular the elementals were. I feel like all the pros immediately clocked how good all these would be and just ran with them. I think we're referring to the elemental incarnations from Lorwyn that all have an enter the battlefield ability. They have 2 different ones depending on what mana is spent to cast them, and they have
Hmm.
a hybrid evoke. So you can just pay 2 and get that spell effectively
That's
because
right.
it evokes and does the thing. But if you pay its full cost, you also get a body and you get both if you're able to get all the colors associated. So they're pretty clean design in general, but I think everybody realized like, oh, they're 2-drop spells, but they're basically like split cards. I have both of these 2-drop spells if my mana base can support it, and
Hmm.
and it can entwine later with a bonus creature if we get there, and
Yeah.
that's the efficiency and the flexibility that these things have is just turns out very good, and
And listen,
immediately clocked.
we saw a lot of this when we were doing the streamer event. If you remember, for Lorwyn
Mm-hmm.
Eclipsed, there were a lot of people that were just jamming almost the entire Elementals package. I mean, not as well tuned as the Pro Tour decks, but I remember running into infinite Elemental decks because people wanted to try them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of them were Reanimator decks that were
Mm.
playing the majority of the Evoke Elementals, because turns out if you pay 2 mana and you evoke something for its ability, Bringer of the Last Gift or whatever out of the Sultai Reanimator deck is just crazy good to reanimate vanilla 6/5s. Never
Right.
mind Arden that can reanimate them into, lifelink menace creatures
Mm-hmm.
for a turn. Um,
Well,
so they all fit into that shell.
100%. Well, and a huge shout out to like Deceit, specifically the Demir one, because of how well that works alongside Superior Spider-Man,
Oh yeah.
aka Kavero the Mind Bitten. This is a 4-drop that you have to pay blue and black for. Well, there's nothing stopping you from playing 2 blue, 2 black and getting both activations on Deceit because you reanimated it for 4. What? Yeah, it's kind of silly how it all lines up.
And note for our arena players out there, if you are playing Kavero,
Mhm.
aka Superior Spider-Man, in any of these variants playing the elementals, manually tap your lands because Arena will not give you the benefit of both when you cast this card. It will when you go to cast like Deceit, like hard cast for 6. It'll appear at the bottom right and it'll say pay blue blue and black black. But if you cast Kavero, it doesn't do that, and it only counts one ability. So you have to know to manually tap your lands, and absolutely never trust the auto tapper. Just as
Don't
a heads up.
just don't do it. Exactly. Yeah,
I've made that mistake plenty of times. I'm sure I will again. So this is my warning to myself.
that is
Don't
a
trust the
great
auto
shout.
tapper.
That is a great shout. I definitely appreciate that. Yeah, they coded the elementals so that like it will check what mana you want to spend because they've identified those cards have the mana association on the activation or on the trigger. But yeah, Kavero has no such. There's no logic in the coding to recognize that you could target one of the elementals with this. Which that's one of those where it is inconvenient that it doesn't clock that for you, but I can also understand why, because that would be an incredibly complex check. So yeah, don't trust the auto tapper.
And it's one of those things that we see this often with some decks where cards work much better in paper than they do digitally for a few reasons. So Superior Spider-Man, aka Kavero, is one of those. Same thing with the infinite combo deck with Appa and Aang, which we'll get to in a moment. You can just say, I'm demonstrating a loop, and we can move on instead of clicking for 10 minutes through this process on Arena, right? Or on Magic Online. So it's interesting. And while we're on the topic of Superior Spider-Man, obviously the winning deck list of Pro Tour Lorwyn Eclipsed was Dimir Excruciator. Which honestly, not that I forgot about the deck, because I used to play the older version of that deck a couple RCQ seasons ago. Hey, you remember when Aether Drift came out and we were playing Dimir Excruciator deck, and
heck
we
yeah,
got to play Oil Deep Gear Hulk was like the other creature we played alongside this, because Oil Deep Gear Hulk does kind of what Deceit does. So they just gave us like a better option. Instead of paying 4 mana for a card, I get to pay 2 mana for a card that Thought Sees You. And Superior Spider-Man works much better with Deceit than it would Oil Deep Gear Hulk, turns out. But yeah, Doomsday Excruciator to try to mill your opponent out for the win condition was the winner of Pro Tour Lorwyn Eclipsed. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Christopher Larson for bringing it down. I'm shocked. Like I literally when I was on stream today and like chatting about it, I even mentioned Excruciator took it down. Somebody even asked, "Wait, that's still legal?" Like, yeah, it's like it's one of those things where, it hasn't left. Yeah, no, nothing rotates anymore. That's how this works. But also like it is viable. Like the fact that this card of all things is competitively viable. It also made for, so I got to say the viewing experience in the finals was fantastic. I swear every time I tuned in, like I tuned in throughout the weekend, like as I was able. I didn't catch as much of it as I would have liked, admittedly, but I swear every time I caught a couple of different matches and like it was Larson's Doomsday deck like every time. And the number of wins that happened one way or another where the winner had no cards in library because of this card is wild. It's very exciting, so it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
You gotta love that. And this is another one of those where it has an enter effect that checks if the card was cast. And so this is one of those effects. I'm shocked at how common these are becoming. And as long as these exist, Kavero / Superior Spider-Man is going to be a valuable tool, and honestly, I kind of love that. It's funny. I feel like right now, I've been complaining for years that Reanimator isn't viable, and now we have the weirdest Reanimator toolkit. But doggone
Yes.
it, it's Reanimator and it's working, and that makes me kind
Yeah.
of happy. I'm not gonna lie. So, in a weird
And
way,
it's
I like it. Yeah.
And it's crazy to think, we are in a standard format where there's infinite ways to deal with your opponent's graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
Jeskai Control is literally playing Rest in Peace in the main,
Yep.
because otherwise it wants that hedge against the graveyard decks and against Is It Lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Soul Guide Lantern is probably the best anti-graveyard card that actually exists in the format, which is great when it's,
I agree.
an uncommon or a common that does that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this gets to spot remove a card, and then you just basically tap and sack it to
Oh yeah.
to exile your opponent's graveyard, which is sweet. Um, so for Reanimator decks to still exist through the best types of graveyard hate that we have means that the power level has to be significantly higher, um, and that the decks are resilient to graveyard removal, right, or
Right.
to graveyard hate. Turns out if you may exile an opponent's graveyard once, but once they land like an evoke elemental, like hard casting it, turns out one, they're pretty good when you hard cast them,
They sure
but
are.
two, wistfulness. Literally, if you pay double green, exiles an enchantment. So nice rest in peace that you might have. It can exile an artifact. If you're playing Ghost Vacuum for some reason over Soul Guide Lantern, so long, friend.
Right.
Um, this card is amazing. First of all, I mean,
Right.
just on double blue, draw two, discard a card. There are many decks in which when you pay 5, you get to exile a target and draw, discard, and get a 6/5. So if you're playing one of the Reanimator decks, this card is just solid. I don't need to reanimate it. I'm just going to pay 5 mana fairly, cast this card, and have a huge threat on the board. Um,
Yeah. Sick.
I think you're right, absolutely, that we're in a spot where multiple types of reanimator decks are good in a
Mm-hmm.
format that is trying to make it so it's not broken enough.
Right.
But because the reanimator decks have to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
they can win being honest. It's kind of weird to say that, right? Because you think traditional reanimator strategy is like, hey, in Commander, I'm going to cast reanimate. I'm going to reanimate your Itali. Haha. Good luck,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, well, and in other reanimator situations, like, well, if they have the rest in peace, like, I hope I draw my one Terra Sunder, but like in this case, we have so many other ways to deal with it. And I know for me, I've done it in the past with different builds, kind of the more traditional kind of reanimator shells, where we don't have things like Kaveru. I've actually had some variants where if I have green in the deck, I'll actually pivot away from a reanimator package into a ramp package because like I'm gonna let you bring all your graveyard hate in, and I'm just gonna ramp to my threats instead. So deal with that, I
Right.
guess. And like I feel like that's easier than ever with these utility creatures. Yeah, if I
Yeah.
just have to, well, and I've done that even with cards like Overlord of the Baelmerk. Like that's a great example of an insane piece.
Oh yeah.
That is, the fact that it is a 5/5 threat once it becomes active. Like your opponent has to respect it. It's your setup piece, and it's
Yeah.
just it's great. So right now standard is riddled with those, and yeah, no, I love doing the honest beatdown plan that nobody's expecting. Yeah, good times.
Now, the second most breakout deck for me, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we've both been experiencing like the landfall decks on the ladder.
Yep.
Some flavor of landfall. But turns out we actually have Splinter Twin in standard. And by Splinter Twin, I mean I'm gonna one shot kill you in one turn type of a deck,
It's a thing.
right? Like
Yeah.
not necessarily make a million guys. And this is actually off of the back of Might Form Harmonizer, which is from
Mm-hmm.
Edge of Eternities. So it's kind of nice to see like that a rare rather than a mythic is like one the focal part of a deck because better accessibility to rares rather than mythics.
Mm-hmm.
Um, less price wise, hopefully. Time will tell on that.
Fingers
But
crossed. Yeah.
this card kills you on turn 4 when you have a fetch land, like because you can keep stacking the triggers. So if you are unfamiliar, y'all, with the Teamer Harmonizer deck, which is the deck that came in second place
Mm-hmm.
from the Pro Tour. Um, we've seen mono green, we've seen like Selesnya with like Lumbering World Wagon, for example, with Might Form Harmonizer, but that deck wasn't really killing you consistently on turn 4. This one is, because it
Mm-hmm.
turns out there is a red pump spell called Full Bore, also from Edge of Eternities. You might have seen your favorite mono red deck play this in the past, sort of as a replacement for Monstrous Rage. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but Full Bore gives your creature +3/+2, which is fair in terms of pumping, but it says if the creature was cast for its warp cost, it gets trample and haste. So, hi, hello. Let me introduce you to my friend, Might Form Harmonizer. Let's on turn 4 warp this into play for 3 mana, and then I'm going to play my favorite fetch land, Fabled Passage. So, turns out a couple things can happen here. Number one, you play the Fabled Passage after you warp this guy. Ability goes on the stack to double the power. While the ability's on the stack, you sack that Fabled Passage and you go get your mountain. Then another ability goes on the stack to double the power. And in response, you tap your mountain and you cast Full Bore on the Might Form Harmonizer. So that pumps us immediately to a 7/6 Trample
Yep.
Haste. Then you double it to 14, and then you double it to 28, and you one-shot your opponent on turn 4. So when I refer to a deck being Splinter Twin in Standard, it's because Splinter Twin in the past was a deck that won on turn 4 from you Splinter Twinning a Pestermite or Deceiver Exarch and whatever. You made infinite copies, you attacked and killed your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, a removal spell could get Might Form Harmonizer off the board, but any competent player is going to play around that, right?
Right.
The fact that this Harmonizer gets trampled though invalidates blocking, which was an issue that we saw with Monstrous Rage, right? Um,
Right.
so it's interesting. So you can do turn 4, you can do more turn 5 more consistently, and because this deck is Teamer, you get to play counter spells alongside it, right? You get to play things that sculpt your hand. So would you believe me if I told you that the Landfall deck in Standard is also playing 4 copies of Consult the Star Charts?
Wait,
And
what?
yeah, and 4
No.
copies of Stock Up. Because
Wait,
turns
whoa,
out
whoa,
when you're
whoa.
yeah, you don't believe
You're
me. It
you're
does. It
telling
does.
me that you're telling me that a combo deck that can kill you on the spot with like 2 or 3 specific cards is running ways to draw cards and like with selection? What? Crazy.
Yes, it's
Bonkers.
amazing, right? It's
It's never
amazing.
would have thought. Yeah.
And what's
Oh
what's
my
really
goodness.
cool and pretty like niche interaction. Let's say your opponent does have that removal spell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
turns out you could play a card called Spider Sense, and you can end web your warped guy back to your hand for 1 blue in the event that they do try to kill it. Um, or you could return, some other creature that you might have on the battlefield. There's not a whole lot of creatures in this Teamer Harmonizer deck,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something that you could do. So we'll take that 2 cards from the Spider-Man standard set, by the way, that really mattered in the Pro Tour this weekend.
There
The
we go.
Superior Spider-Man and Spider Sense.
We got 2 of them. Let's go. To this
So
day,
for
when
all the
some
Spider-Man haters out there,
absolutely.
yeah,
Well, the thing I find so funny about Spider-Man as a set, there are like 30 cards in it that have the name Spider-Man in their
right.
name or whatever. Like I feel like that's a hyperbole and an exaggeration, but I fear it's actually not that far off. But in any event, there's so many of them. But when someone says, "Oh, he played Spider-Man," I know exactly which card they're referring to. There's
Oh
no
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty clear.
Yep. Every time. So, yeah, it says a lot. Yeah, man. So yeah, full on. So yeah, full on Splinter Twin. That is a wild stack. I love it when people figure out how to hold full control and get weird with it. I do like that in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one Splinter Twin deck that we have in the format.
One of them.
Yo,
Oh,
that's one of them
yes.
because there is another one, right? That is the Bant Airbending deck.
Oh,
In
right,
the
of
event,
course.
I mean, granted, it takes 3 pieces to fire off the combo, right? We're
Right.
talking about the deck that plays Doc Arlock from
Yep.
Outlaws of Thunder Junction, so that reduces your spells from exile by 2. That's the important part of that card,
Right.
right? So you take Doc Arlock on 2, and you get to play Aang Swift Savior on turn 3 from Avatar, right? Aang says when it enters, you get to airbend a spell or a creature.
Spell or creature. Yep.
Spell or creature. And then you get to play my favorite, Appa,
Yep. Yep.
Steadfast Guardian. And Appa says you get to airbend any number of your permanents or any number of your creatures or whatever.
And non-land permanents. It's any of them.
Non-land permanents. And
so
it gets to infinitely cycle out Aang Swift Savior. And because you have Doc Arlock, you keep casting these things for 0. And so you rinse, repeat, and this makes you infinite allies, right? Because every time you get to play an ally, Appa is going to go ahead and make you a token, right? So rinse, repeat, and keep going. Now, on turn 4, you can establish infinite 1/1s, but you might not be able to win on turn 4. Unless you, for some reason, went ahead and did something like Badgermole Cub, let's say. Right? If you go ahead and put Badgermole Cub in play, we have the ability to earthbend a land and infinitely airbend it out and then in and put a bunch of +1/+1 counters on it, on a land. And so the land can kill you. Or all your lands can kill you, but it's one land that's going to attack, right?
Hooray.
Splinter Twin,
exactly. Well, and this deck also, like, if you've ever played against us on the ladder, you know, these little guys are so slippery. Like, actually trying to target your, time your removal to make it meaningful against this deck is so hard because, you know, they're always playing on your end step. The 2 main combo pieces, you know, have flash. So, like, and if you remove Doc Arlock, okay, maybe they can't go infinite, but they could still probably go big enough because we're still talking about a lot of flying threats that are still developing a board state as they go, even if it's not truly infinite. So, this deck gets, This deck is pretty gnarly and a very effective engine. I do wonder when they built, you know, when they were putting this together or when they were developing the Avatar set, if anyone in R&D like clocked the fact that Doc Arlock existed in Standard. I wonder. I genuinely don't know, but yeah.
I don't either. That's the interesting part because you know when we the last major thing that happened in Standard, right, is when they banned VV and Screaming Nemesis and Prof's Memory. And I remember, and I've probably referenced this before, I remember that weekly MTG stream where they came on to talk about the philosophy behind banning the cards, and they said, there are too many sets in Standard. they said, they did, I swear to you, they said this. You can go watch the video. They said there are too many sets in Standard for them to catch everything. And that was in reference to Agatha's Soul Cauldron's interaction specifically with VV, right? We know, like, VV was a card that was changed in design before they clicked the print button. That was mistake number 1. But mistake number 2 was missing and testing that interaction, right? Which they said they did. So they said there's too many sets in Standard. Now, Thunder Junction is not that far off of Avatar. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, 6 sets, 7 sets in Standard a year, it's kind of off, right? But
it's far enough back.
Specifically test that interaction. I can't say yes or no because we don't know. But there are lots of interaction in Standard right now to stop or prevent your enter the battlefield abilities. So maybe they did design it this way, saying, you know, along the lines of thinking that there are ways to deal with this infinite combo. You know, hey, we need 3 pieces in order for this to work. Is there sufficient removal in Standard to deal with a possible infinite combo? But it's so interesting because you continue to see, like, maybe new tools that the deck gets access to with the newer cards that come out that make you think, oh, wait, no, this is by design. We wanted Aang and Appa to go infinite because that's canon, right? It should just happen this way. The Avatar should do something infinitely great to absolutely wreck the Standard format. I'm fine. I get behind that. Just in the same way that VV destroyed the format, but not really. Don't do that again. But this infinite combo is relevant. Yeah.
No, and for the record, like, I don't think this is problematic that this infinite exists. Nope. It's just, and it's just interesting, and I just, given the context, can't help but wonder, like, did R&D clock that, or was that a miss? You know, Yeah, and this being a conscious choice, I certainly wouldn't disagree with. Yeah, I just find that interesting. That's the other thing. So you casually mentioned Badger Mole Cub, and it's been a half an hour into this podcast before we've really even mentioned it. And I love how you just mentioned it as a way, not even for its ramp potential, just as a way to get an Earthbend ETB. That's all it's really doing in that context. But when I think about like decks being problematic, like I can't help but think of Badger Mole Cub because we were talking about this a little bit, I think, before we started. But like people, I saw a ton of people when the metagame breakdown was announced going into this Pro Tour saying that Badger Mole Cub needed to get banned. And because its adoption rate was so high, because like 30% of players were on Nature's Rhythm featuring Badger Mole Cub. Which, okay, that's a heavy adoption rate. But like, as it turns out, as the weekend progressed, those decks kind of got worked. Like it didn't really. The
deck came prepared to deal with Badger Mole Cub, which is what you would expect in a competitive metagame. Wow, who would have thought? Right.
Well, and that's the thing, because like problematic cards are when everybody like locks on that a card is going to be an issue, and some people try to tech against it, and those people are unsuccessful and are unable to beat it, even targeting it. And that clearly isn't the case here. People are locked on and recognize this card is going to be a powerhouse. It's going to be really, really popular, really powerful, and a bunch of people are like, therefore I should be playing it. Then a bunch of other people were like, okay, I just need to plan my deck around it, and their plans worked.
Listen, we have. It's not like it was so long ago that we had to make bans because the format was unhealthy. It literally just happened, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I think, just in general, I think Magic players are, and this is something we probably both talked about on stream.
Absolutely.
I think Magic players are always quick to call for bans because they are annoyed by the power level of certain cards. And listen, I'm not saying that people aren't entitled to their opinion. You are totally entitled to your opinion and the way that you want to feel about things, and it's fine. But like, there is a significant difference from being annoyed about playing against a certain archetype or variant or card than absolutely broken format destroyed, right? You're talking about you referenced essentially what we did experience, which was the only deck that was viable to beat the VV deck was mono red. So mono red took over the format because it was the only deck that could sufficiently race to beat VV, right? So I had to beat it faster than VV could kill you. And it also happened to be super fast. That was good against all of the non-existent mid-range decks in the format, right? Because mid-range couldn't beat VV. So we're talking about a significantly warped standard format in which people were not going to paper tournaments because they didn't want to have to play in the atmosphere. We're talking about a mistake from Wizards of the Coast for not taking immediate action to save that RCQ season. Badger Mole Cub is nowhere near that conversation at
Not
all.
even close.
If there's anything that you want to talk about, you might want to talk about how the earthbending mechanic is very strong, and we've talked about that on plenty of podcasts.
Yeah, we have.
Go watch those episodes from when earthbending got previewed. And I remember specifically being here. Again, I was one of the ambassadors for Avatar, so when I opened up these earthbending cards, I was like, "There's no way that this isn't a very, very, very strong mechanic." Right? The fact that, like, if you blow up the land that's been earthbended, that you still get it back. So there is actual no downside to earthbending your lands. Unless somebody ultimas you, which, fair, also probably can.
Sure.
Right? So, like...
More than likely.
Yeah, it's gotta be, surely. And so, Badger Mole Cup doesn't even touch that. Is Badger Mole a very good card? Yes. Has green been able to flourish as a color outside of Badger Mole Cub? No, right?
Not even close.
You're talking about some of the Golgari decks that were playing Ouroboroi before this. Golgari midrange was relatively unplayable, but in previous standard format with VV, Ouroboroi was playable and playable on turn 3, right? Because you have Llanowar Elves, and I think if you want to have the real conversation, the conversation should be that Llanowar Elves should have never been put back into standard because it enables your faster strategies, right? So,
yes. That I find that so funny because if we actually go what should be banned in standard conversation, you and I are going to be mentioning cards that's on like Yeah, like we're gonna get weird according to what some people might, because I think Landware Elves and Omniscience just need to go. Like I just do. I know Omniscience is seeing no play right now. I don't care. Get it out anyway.
If you couldn't play double Badger Mole Cub on turn 3, would it be as strong as it is now? And I
I
think
don't
that
think
answer
so.
is no.
Yeah,
Right?
agreed.
Because what enables that is Llanowar Elves. There's no other one drop in this format that enables you to play 2 Badger Mole Cubs on turn 3. It's Llanowar Elves that does that, right? If you played land tapped on turn 1, then played Badger Mole Cub on turn 2, animate a land, and they kill the Badger Mole Cub, you still only have 2 mana, and it's significantly more fair. If you blow up the Badger Mole Cub, you still have 3 mana. Right? You still
It's
cast that Ouroboros on turn
it's so
3.
silly. Yeah.
The difference is you cannot go as wide, which is what the Rhythm deck is doing, right? The Rhythm deck is using Badger Mole Cub to take advantage of Llanowar Elves, Gene Pollinator, Spider Manifestation, or Leyline Weaver, as it's called on Arena, right? Take
Right.
advantage of all of these mana creatures and cast Nature's Rhythm to either search for more Badger Mole Cubs, search for the Ouroboros for the win condition, or Crater Hoof. Which honestly, I'm loving
Which
that Crater Hoof is a win
is
condition in standard,
also
right?
back. Yeah.
I have no problems with this at all. This sounds great.
I'm
This is
actually kind of cool with that. Yeah. I feel like I should
yes.
be mad, but I'm not. You know. Like, yeah.
And if the Crater Hoof ends up in your hand somehow, I mean, hell yeah, I get to hard cast this Crater Hoof from my hand and win the game, right? Um, but I say all of this because number one, the Rhythm deck is a top contender in the format because it's the best Badger Mole Cub deck that you could be playing, and number two, it's enabled because of Llanowar Elves. So it's all fine. We both understand here that Badger Mole Cub is a very, very, very strong card,
Yeah.
right? We also both understand that green decks haven't been viable in standard in some time, right?
Yep.
We've been given some tools in terms of the color green recently, like Frenzied Baloth from Edge of Eternity is very strong green card, but also barely seen play, right? You're talking about a
Right.
card that says card can't be countered, right? Or you can't counter that spell. It stops your other creatures from being countered. But Badger Mole Cub is significantly stronger because it helps enable all of those ramp creatures that now we have in standard, and it allows you to create doubling effects. And doubling effects have always been strong, and no matter the format, right? In terms of doubling your mana here, take a look at the Elementals deck, Roaming Throne. There's an
Yep.
uncommon elemental that doubles elemental triggers. All of those types of effects. There's a reason those cards are infinite money in Commander, right?
Oh my
That's why
goodness,
everybody
yes.
wants Panharmonicon effects.
Yep.
These cards are strong.
They just are.
Okay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Personally, I would prefer if they not keep printing like doubling abilities of cards in
Agreed.
standard. Like keep that to the commander cards or whatever. And this is not a criticism of Commander. I love playing Commander. I'm a Panharmonicon Andy. I love Atali. Cast everybody's spells twice. Sign me up for that. But
100%.
in standard, if they are cheap to be able to play doubling effects, they're typically played and typically very good. And I think you see that with multiple cards in standard right now.
You know, well, I have great news. We don't just have to worry about doubling anymore. Coming later this year in Strixhaven, they are bringing us a card that has an exponent in it. Okay, this is a random aside, but like we're talking about, and for the record, I'm 100% with you. Doubling, the moment you do doubling, the moment you add doubling in as a common mechanic, any other strategy that is adding is at a colossal disadvantage. And we've reached a point right now where there are so many multiplication effects, especially as it relates to power. Like we have Tifa, Mossborn Hydra, and Mightform Harmonizer all present right now that all double their power when landfall hits. In the case of Mossborn, it's even permanent. Like the trying to keep up with that doing addition is just laughable. It doesn't work. Yeah, and I find that very frustrating. But I want to point out Mathemagics. This is a preview from Strixhaven. It's a sorcery for XX blue blue that says target player draws 2 to the X cards. So it's literally an exponent. So we're literally growing exponentially based on X.
Math is for blockers, not for me. The most math I do is jank doppelganging. to
Right.
figure out if I win the game or not.
I guess
So
your doppelgang math is impressive too, because I've definitely had doppelgang and I've been trying to work the math out, and like in the chat you'll just throw it because you get it. You've done that enough times, you know.
yes.
Yeah.
And so this card is the same, right? Because it's double X, right? Doppelgang
Yeah.
is double X, right? Or I'm sorry, triple X.
Doppelgang's triple X. But yeah.
Triple X. So this is double X. So if you can ramp enough, you can just make your opponent draw their whole deck, and that
Yeah.
sounds fine and dandy. I bet you that this card, finds itself into some type of ramp strategy. Like it doesn't fit in the Badgermole Cub deck because that's going to crater hoof you. So like,
Right.
what could you do that's better than that? Is making your opponent or you drawing literally infinite cards like going to win you the game? I don't know.
I don't know.
But again, math is not for me. It's for blockers. Yeah.
Right, that is what it is. That's what they say. But yeah, this definitely looks like it's designed for control shells. It's one of those where, and this is coming out in the Strixhaven set later this year. We got some time yet.
So we're 2 years in, two years. No, we're not. We're 2 sets in advance.
Sets, which is 3 months, 4 months. It's which sounds like it should be an exaggeration, but it's not. But yeah. The one thing that I love about the design on Mathemagics is, well, for the record, I hate that this card exists. I really dislike the fact that like we're getting to the point where, this game is already complicated. This game already has a lot of math going in it. So I guess if this is helping, high school kids do their math homework while they're playing games with their buddies, like, all right, great, I guess. There's nothing wrong with that. But the one thing about the templating on the card that I really appreciate is the reminder text. It spells out exactly all the way up to 5. So if you get if you're spending 12 or fewer mana on this, the number's directly in front of you. It's an open book test, thank goodness. Because and so and on top of that, it's templated as reminder text. It's in brackets, and even on normally the extended art versions of cards don't include reminder text because it looks cleaner without reminder text, which I'm cool with for showcase cards. Sure, this one still has it because they just know that is load bearing reminder text. We need that in there. So I'm glad they did that. That was a smooth choice on their part.
I have to tell you, when I saw this card and I saw that the reminder text was on there, it reminded me of OG Niv Mizzet, the Firemind.
Yes,
how Niv Mizzet had like the formula on it. Not that it was relevant to the gameplay, but original Niv Mizzet, the Firemind from Ravnica, or from Guild Pact rather. Just reminds me of that flavor text.
Heck yeah, where it's just a big goofy equation. Yeah, I do love it. I love that flavorful. See, that's the thing. I love the flavorful math. I think that's great. But when it's actually part of the rules text, and that ultimately is the thing that I find just kind of annoying in general. When I don't know, I like silly and I like whimsy, but I don't like it being in the actual rules. I feel that way about like stickers and attractions as well. I don't like that they're actually in the game. If that makes sense. Like maybe that's silly. Like Silver Border was there for a reason. I think some of that stuff should stay there. I don't know. That's an old take, but anyway, it is what it is. But yeah, Mathemagics. We're going back to Strixhaven. We're all going to go to school. We're all going to be doing math homework. So that should be fun. Although, actually, I think this card's going to play pretty well in Commander. Because, if it's lower than, if you can get up to like X equals 4, so that's, 10 mana, you draw 16 cards. Sick. Like, that's a huge benefit. And if you can get basically 6 or more, its target player draws what's left of their deck, right?
And if you are playing Thassa's Oracle, you're rejoicing because obviously that and Lab Maniac is like instant win, right? With these types of cards. Same thing with like Wan Shi Tong from Avatar being basically a win condition in Commander, right? Because you just play that together with Lab Man and Thassa's Oracle and you just win the game. Or Wan Shi Tong from the main set. You have Librarian, that one. Because you just pay infinite mana. You develop infinite mana into X, draw your deck, win the game. And this sits in your command zone, so it's protected, and it has flash. So it's kind of like Little Monk at TOS, if you ask me. But the spell is the same thing. In that sense, that if you develop infinite mana and you have the ability to draw your deck in one turn, I mean, maybe it's not. I don't play CEDH, but I have to imagine that cards like that, where you are developing infinite mana very early on in the game, obviously you would take advantage of that here.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine Yeah, it reminds me a lot of like Exsanguinate, if I'm honest in that regard. Except
Yeah.
Exsanguinate doesn't have the benefit of being able to draw you like 2 cards in a pinch or whatever, you know. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, like once you have infinite mana, it's just I guess I win now. You know, it has kind of that vibe to it, which there's nothing wrong with that, I suppose. But I don't know, when in a format where when it comes to Commander, you know, we got to be careful about, you know, 2-card infinites and like cheap, you know, easy ways to end the game. Meanwhile, like if I just ramp a bunch, I could just have this in there and it's just I guess you die. Like I don't know. That seems like it's something that's really powerful that we got to be aware of. You know, just be sensitive to that in your when you're talking deck power level. I have a Door to Nothingness deck, so I'm throwing stones in my glass house big time on this.
Sure, yeah.
But just having a card draw spell
Yeah,
that just
but like,
could also secret mode kill a dude is kind of like kill a player is kind of wild.
But like winning the game with Door to Nothingness is fun though.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Like, how often do you actually get to just make your opponent lose by paying 2 of each color mana and then sacrificing Door to Nothingness?
You know, not
like,
as
I
often
was
as
trying to do that.
I was
trying to do that in Standard when that card first was in Standard, and it was terrible. It's a very, very bad idea.
So
but
bad.
like, it was fun.
Oh yeah. It's great. And that deck was a lot of fun to build. Trying to come up with like ways to actually like untap enough stuff to be able to like and ways to copy the door or like recur it from the graveyard so I can actually get all 3 players with it. I don't know, it's fun. That's a delightful deck. Because I also only ever run it in like power 4 pods and it gets bodied. But like it has a bunch of tutors and nonsense in it that I don't want to play in a bracket 3.
Right.
But anyway, that's a different conversation for a different day. So Standard, so we're banning Cub, right?
Absolutely not.
I kid. I joke.
Yeah.
No,
I'm very much fine with that card staying in the format.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And so everybody out there, if you find yourself wanting to say, oh, I think this card should be banned, try to figure out where that thought's coming from. If it's an emotional response, if you're having an emotional feeling of like, oh, I believe this card needs to be banned, it's what you're really saying is I need this card to be answered because it is a problem that is ruining my fun. You know what's awesome? As a player who picks what cards are in your deck and what cards are in your sideboard, you have agency over that. So find the tools and find the cards that can stop this thing. Like we mentioned Spell Snare earlier. I know like Airbender's Ascension you can mess with it a little bit. Sweepers really can go a long way against these cards. Like even something as simple as a shock can really like slow this thing down. Because that's ultimately what they need. They need speed bumps. Like you need to be putting speed bumps in front of these ramp decks, you know, and then have some kind of plan to crack back. Like understand the plan of that your deck is trying to execute, and understand what do you like. I would genuinely think, okay, so if I'm playing a control deck, I need a way on turn 3 to be able to disrupt their game plan well enough to get to my sweeper, which is going to be a 4 or 5 or whatever the case may be. Like, and understand, like, be that specific with what you're looking for and what you need. Like, the idea of, okay, I'm on the draw against Badger Mole. I need a 1 mana way to slow them down and answer them. Like, you know, look at your options in your colors. What 1-drop answers do we have access to? There's probably something. You just gotta
in Lorwyn Eclipsed, they gave you more answers, right? Requiring Hex and black, blows up any creature with mana value 2 or less, and you can gain life if you really want to blight on something, right? So you know this we're missing a very strong black instant speed 1 mana removal spell. We were so used to having cut down before that card exited the format, right? You know, and you see, if you take a look at the Pro Tour decks, you know, a lot of the Dimir builds are playing Requiting Hex specifically to deal with Badger Mole Cub, because you need to be able to answer that early threat before you are able to then adequately play your sweepers and then win the game. You know, the Boros Dragons deck, for example. I mean, that is primary example of like a deck that's just fantastic against Badger Mole Cub strategies. You're talking about a card in Clarion Conqueror that just shuts off all of the creatures that you've earthbended, right? Brutal. Like when they earthbend a land with Badger Mole Cub and you slam Clarion Conqueror, they can't tap that land for mana anymore. So they're actually behind on mana now when you Clarion Conqueror them.
Congratulations, you Stone Raid yourself.
Yeah, this same deck is playing like Magmatic Hellkite, also from
Hmm.
Tarkir Dragonstorm. That's just going to blow up a non-basic. Non-basics typically are the lands that are targeted with Earthbending, so that way you at least put them at -1 mana, and you put them behind a turn because the land you search for becomes stunned for a turn. Um, so you're talking about a deck that's really good against that one, and any other like green mid-range strategy that might be based around like Llanowar Elves and Gene Pollinator.
Hmm.
Um, so I think just generally as Magic players, a few things. I already spoke to the fact that a lot of us tend to complain about annoying cards, but
Hmm.
also, and something we've said plenty of times is we play way more digital Magic on Arena and Magic Online than you do in paper. So you just encounter these cards more often. Like,
Oh
we've
yeah.
all had those days. I've got, what was it, 2 weeks ago? I was getting paired up against Is It Lessons like 6 matches in a row.
Oof.
Sometimes it just happens that way,
Hmm.
right? The arena client or Magic Online client is not rigged in terms of the matchups that it's putting you up against.
No.
It's just people are playing the decks that they are testing and that they enjoy playing. Sometimes you
Hmm.
just run into that matchup. There's no difference from you playing a paper event and getting paired against the same matchup 4 or 5 times in a row. It's just, it just happens. Um, you imagine that's what the Pro Tour players here thought was hoped happened, right? They hoped
Hmm.
to get paired against the Badger Mole Cub decks. They all came prepared for them, and the pros who did very well in this event, right? They had
Right.
not necessarily tech, but something that went over the top of the Badger Mole Cub decks, and they succeeded in the events. And those who came with the most fine-tuned Badger Mole Cub decks also did well, right? Just didn't make the conversion rate that people thought would happen. Because maybe they had bad days. Maybe they got paired up against all the people who were playing the Badger Mole Cub decks. Or the anti-Badger Mole Cub decks. That's
Yep.
magic. Um, and I also think, like, from an online perspective, a lot of folks are like building decks too much like solitaire. Like, you want
Mm.
your deck to do
Hmm.
what it does, and you also don't want to interact with your opponent, right? But that doesn't make the best decks in the format. You have to play interaction. You have to be particular about the card choices that you play against what the current metagame is, right?
Hmm.
For example, and this is not a knock on life gain decks, right? I see a lot of people play like Orzhov life gain decks all the time. Your
Sure.
deck is going to get destroyed by the Badger Mole Cub decks because you don't play interaction, right?
Yep.
You can't just play like Hinterland Sanctifier into 2 mana gain life guy. You can't just like case of the what is it called, Uneaten Feast
Oh,
plus
Uneaten Feast.
Halia.
Yeah.
You might gain a bunch of life and you're still dead to Craterhoof Behemoth,
Hmm.
like on turn 5 or
Well,
6, right? Like,
because you're adding and they're multiplying. What do you want to do? Like
yes,
anyway. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And again, it's not a knock on the life gain decks. I'm just using that
Right.
as an example because decks like that want to solitaire. They
Hmm.
flourish when you solitaire. So the moment your opponent plays interaction against you, the game plan falls apart, right?
Hmm.
In the same way that the Badgermole Cubs decks want to solitaire against you. And if you stop
Yes.
them from doing what they're doing and you don't allow them to do that, you might win the game. And that's what playing interaction in your decks do, or choosing certain cards in your deck to play, right? You might not want to play Torch the Tower. You might not want to play Burst Lightning. Well, turns out like those are cards that interact against those decks pretty well. And Burst Lightning also might just burn your face for 4, right? So,
Right.
you know, it's all about card selection and not wanting the solitaire. Or at least
Absolutely.
make sure your solitaire plan is that broken, but that doesn't exist right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Bedroom Cup decks are the yeah, I think the best like solid or the closest you can get to like a true solitaire situation, like what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
I well said. I'm right there with you. And I think Magic, if it wasn't, I mean, there's a reason that it's a competitive 1v1 game. Like two decks are at the table together. That is by design. That is how the game works. We need to be interacting and playing, across from one another. That's the context for every single thing you do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoy the idea of like, goldfishing out the ideal curve. When people are like, oh, this idea of, well, the one the one idea when Mox Jasper was first
Oh
spoiled.
yeah.
I think the God 7 turn 1 win that people were like figured out. Like, sure, that's theoretically
Yeah.
possible, but like you can't even mulligan once, and you need exactly 7 exact cards in your starting hand.
Yeah.
Like yeah, okay, that's a fun daydream, but like let's be realistic. Like that doesn't.
Like, yes, I agree with your point. What reminds me of that, you remember, you're talking about like the solid 7 you needed to have with
Yeah.
Mox Jasper. Then you need to play like bad cards like Leyline of Transformation, right?
Right.
To make
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
dragons.
To make
And
all
you
the
were
things
doing
dragons. Yeah.
all of that just to make an additional mana for free, right?
Right.
So like you're talking the most solitaire of decks. That reminds me that, eerily of and we experienced this during the streamer event for Lorwyn
Mm-hmm.
Eclipsed. People being on the Vivid dream, right? Where they were playing Leyline of the Guild Pack, so that way you could Bloom
Yep.
Tender and tap for 5 and play Aurora Awakener. And I love that card, and I think that is a viable strategy because it's very fast. But the moment your opponent plays a piece of interaction, your solitaire plan just falls apart,
The whole thing.
right?
Yeah.
There's like variants out there that are playing like 8 clones in the deck to clone the Aurora Awakener to continue to keep triggering the Vivid thing to then
Sure.
somehow win the game in some capacity. It's great. It's fine if you like to play that deck. Those are my types of decks that I like to play. But you die when somebody kills the Bloom Tender. Or
Yep.
if somebody plays a 2-mana Wistfulness and exiles your Leyline of the Guild Pack, then your Bloom Tender is only ever tapping for 1 mana, and it's a worse Badgermole Cub,
Yep.
right? So, like, we all like to do these things, but you have to understand at the same time that it might not be the most viable deck against the competitive
Mm-hmm.
format or like a tier 1 deck, and you need to edit your strategies to do what you want to do, plus interact. And sometimes for some decks, like the Vivid deck,
Mm-hmm.
like Life Gain, like Mox Jasper / Leyline of Transformation, it just doesn't work because
No.
sometimes you play interaction and then it dilutes your strategy and then you can't do the strategy.
Right.
So
Yeah. So what's your plan B? And I think that's something that is so critical. And that's
yeah,
always a question I have whenever I'm like tinkering with an idea. That's always the thing. It's like, okay, this is plan A. This is the thing I'm going to try to do. Once that gets stopped, what's next?
right.
And decks like the Excruciator deck, the reason that's successful is, okay, even if I don't have a secondary mill piece, I still have the 6/6 flyer that I can pop you in the mouth with. So like if I have
Yes.
to, I can do that. That's an option. Or we're talking about the Kaveru decks and like with these or these elemental packages, like they all come with bodies. If the effects aren't lining up, we still have bodies. So
Yes.
yeah, like it being. And the other thing I think a lot of deck builders and a lot of players often lose sight of, and the pros that we saw over the weekend certainly did not, is creativity and expression, not only in the deck builds but also in play. Like get creative have an open mind to all the different resources that are at your disposal.
Yeah.
Like with a card like Wistfulness, or any of these elementals, like they all come with extra options. So maybe you specifically put this in your deck because you're expecting, you need to have artifact, or enchantment hate. The more I look at this card, the more awesome it seems. This particular one, but don't hesitate to like when you're down and you just need a particular card off the top, and like having a 6/5 in play isn't going to help you, but having extra mana open if you draw the right card, like don't hesitate to evoke this for the 2 blue and go digging for something else. That's pretty, that's kind of that's play to your outs, right? And like understand how many turns you have, but be creative. Don't hesitate to try to find some awkward, secondary lines. Like don't hesitate to, if you're just completely stymied, don't hesitate to use that Kaveru on the Wistfulness in your graveyard to just dig for the one thing you need.
Right.
That's not usually a good use
combo. Yeah.
It's not usually a good use of resources, but if it's what you have, use it. Like just try to, put your best foot forward every single time and try to find those creative opportunities. When you think, oh, I'm just dead here. And this is going to be like, I'm being very hypocritical for anyone who's tuned into my stream recently, because I can be very negative sometimes in the middle of so this I'm talking to myself as much as everybody else out here. You know, recognize the resources that you have and recognize every option. You know, like for example, one line that I played recently, I'm playing with Moonshadow in a couple of decks, which is a really fun card from Lorwyn Eclipsed. It's not seeing a lot of play right now because it is an elemental, but it's doing something that's a little more unique than some of the other pieces. I suspect there will come a day when this has its moment, but it's not right now. But I play it in a couple of decks, and I had somebody try to hit this on the ladder with the end, and it was a 2/2 at the time. I still had 5 counters on it. So it was a 2/2, and I had 4 in the deck, and it was a really critical part of what I was trying to do. Well, I had Dawnhand Dissident on the battlefield, and it was untapped. And so I actually tapped it and blighted 2 to like exile a land from my graveyard or something because it was the only viable target. But as a result, I was able to use Dawnhand Dissident, which was an engine component that was doing other things, as a sacrifice outlet to prevent the creature that was being targeted from being exiled. You know, so like that's one of those things where like the Blight 2 is usually a downside, but in that moment it was able to, you know, turn a bad situation into, you know, the opponent did not get the sheer value they were looking for because I used one of my resources in a different way. That's just one example top of mind. But also fellow Insidious Roots players, Dawnhand Dissident's great. Don't be sleeping on this card. Anyway. And there was actually one Abzan Roots list that was registered at the Pro Tour, and I was rooting for them so freaking hard.
Yeah. I know a couple of people who've been playing Abzan Roots lately. Even when I went to Spotlight Atlanta, I ran into a couple of people playing Insidious Roots. Hey, listen, that card is very fun. And powerful when it pops off, right? It's like it's like a sleeper. It's a card where like if your opponent lands on the board, you better kill it in like a turn or two, because if not, your opponent's popping off, and then it's going to be more difficult to deal with them. You know, again, graveyard based type strategy deck, but you know, this card also only costs 2 mana. So
exactly. But the Insidious Roots is also an interesting one because it's an engine that does so much, but the problem is if you've built your deck to take advantage of it, you have to have a lot of like suboptimal cards that aren't great on their own. So the plan B with this deck becomes really tough to put together. So anyway, so that's I'm holding out hope that someday an Insidious Roots will be the thing, but we're not there yet. More to come on that.
While you're on the topic of like plan B of decks, something that I see, you know, very often, you know, I play a lot of viewer brews over on my channel. I've been playing actually a lot more than I've usually done because I think it's just fun, and I think Standard is diverse enough to be able to play something different a lot. And so it's something that I always tell folks when I look at a deck, when somebody submits a deck, and this, by the way, is not dedicated to any like particular person. It's something that I see across a variety of decks that are submitted. Folks tend to submit decks sometimes that have like 2 game plans to it, or like a main game plan and then something on the side that doesn't jive with the main game plan. And I always end up like making the comment that your deck would just be better if you picked one of these, right? So like, for example, you mentioned Moonshadow, which is why I got on this train of thought, right? Moonshadow very clearly cares about your cards going to the graveyard, right? From somewhere in order to remove those -1/-1 counters. So if you were playing a deck that has that as a game plan in it, and the rest of your deck or another good portion of your deck has absolutely nothing to do with what Moonshadow wants to do, you need to pick a lane, because you're going to get frustrated yourself in terms of deck building, because you're going to have a conflicted deck that then might not be able to handle what other people are doing, right? Pick a main game plan and then play interaction, right? You would not play, for example, a ramp deck with Moonshadow in it. It just doesn't jive, right? Your ramp deck is doing things for you to play big payoff spells. So why do that? Why make yourself suffer at that?
Right.
You know what I mean? Play ramp or play a Moonshadow deck, right? And you can build that in many ways. But I feel like most folks who are brewing decks don't see that. They just see like cool cards that they want to play, and that's totally cool. I'm always down for playing cool cards. But I think if there's any advice I can give to somebody who is Bruin decks against this current standard format
Mm-hmm.
that's very diverse, pick your game plan and stick to that lane,
Yep.
right? Don't try to get very convoluted to do 20 different things when you just need to do one and figure a way to do it well.
Agreed. I absolutely agree with that. And so that when we talk about having a backup plan, it doesn't mean have a divergent plan. It means
Right.
having something you can do. And usually when I talk about a backup plan, like a positive backup plan, it's usually like a secondary line that you can take with the cards you already have. It's not, you definitely want to focus on your main strategy. At the end of the day, if you're trying to determine, okay, I need some kind of, I need some kind of artifact or enchantment removal. Do I run Wistfulness, or do I run Chomping Changeling, or do I run Scrap Gore or Scrap Shooter? It's like, well, what are some of your other deck's weaknesses? And, to try to determine that, like, I know I've run Scrap Shooter in quite a few builds in the past. I think Wistfulness is going to take that slot really, really comfortably. But one of the benefits of Scrap Shooter is that it gives you a 4/4 reacher for 3 in addition to everything else that's got going on. So it like blows up a threat and is a big body on the field. So in more mid-rangey builds that aren't necessarily trying to go over the top, but I just need as many like resources on the field to combat aggro, or in decks that are more aggressive, this card's actually just quite good. Yeah, and I've also found in Insidious Roots, Chomping Changeling is shockingly good. Like far better than I expected, because it's a plant. And so as your Insidious Roots is triggering, it's getting counters, which is just delightful. And your and Emptiness can reanimate it as well, quite favorably. So it just lines up with the primary game plan as well. But at the same time, I'm not gonna. Actually, Scrap Shooter is a good example of one that in an Insidious Roots deck that is running Emptiness or other like Unearth style effects, I'm not gonna. I would rather not run Scrap Shooter because I need to cast it to get the effect. And if I reanimate it, I can't. And so I would much rather have a different piece of removal there. Which is also a reason why Wistfulness might not be ideal either, come to think of it, for that idea.
Yeah, anyway. For that particular. Yeah.
Yeah, for that particular.
Another good example is like Scavenging Ooze versus Keen-Eyed Curator, right?
Yeah.
Many of us are used to playing Scavenging Ooze in formats past, where Scavenging Ooze was like that card that just grows in power toughness when you exile creatures with it. You are able to gain life. So you get this big bulky Scavenging Ooze, and Scavenging Ooze by itself would be a threat that kills your opponent. Well, we have Keen-Eyed Curator from Bloomburrow, which is harder to cast in the sense that it's double green, but it has better stats. But this card becomes more of a threat when you're able to enable essentially Pseudo Delirium, right? 4 different card types exiled with it. It turns into a 7/7 trample. Now, granted, it can't grow beyond that, but a 3/3 is significantly better than a 2/2 to start. And turning this into a threat in the late game is possibly more important than Scavenging Ooze. So if you're playing mono green, do you play this card or do you play Scavenging Ooze? What's the better choice, right? Mono green, obviously, Keen-Eyed Curator. If you're playing like a 2-color deck that is based green, but let's say you're playing Gruul, do you play Scavenging Ooze or Keen-Eyed Curator when you have like basically perfect mana, right? If you're playing a 3-color deck, you definitely cannot play Keen-Eyed Curator. I'll just tell you that. Even you could have the best mana in the world, but you might have a hand. Let's say you're playing Teamer and you've got Stomping Ground Steam Vents. Well, that ain't casting you a Keen-Eyed Curator. So Scavenging Ooze is much better on your mana.
Right.
You should be playing Soul Guide Lantern, but just using that example, like sometimes your card choices matter. What's easier for you to cast and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, you should be using Soul Guide Lantern if the pure purpose is to shut down graveyard strategies.
Right.
As an Insidious Roots player, I'm very familiar with this debate between these two cards. Because we want to be able to exile our own graveyard, and in that situation, the difference between double green and the casting cost versus the generic, I kind of like that Keen-Eyed Curator is only generic, but I've found almost every other. Almost every Insidious Roots deck I've seen, including ones that I've owned in paper, it's been Scavenging Ooze over Keen-Eyed, just because at the end of the day, we want to be exiling exclusively creatures, usually.
Right.
And so the additional life gain is nice, and mana is good enough that every activation being green isn't disqualifying, even though I have thought about that, especially in like Abzan builds, or if I wanted to like get saucy and had a splash of some kind, like then the fact that Keen Eye Curator is generic is a factor. But I don't think it's enough of one, but this is a great debate. These two cards look fairly similar, but I think you need to be aware of what's your deck trying to do. Well, and that's the other thing, graveyard hate in general. If we were to like take another step, if I have a deck that has green in it and I just need graveyard hate, I would much rather be running Soul Guide Lantern in general, unless I have good activations, in which case maybe I give the Soul Cauldron would be worthwhile. But if I want to have a critical mass of creatures and I'm running Insidious Roots, I'm probably going to be running Scavenging Ooze in the main, because exiling cards out of my own graveyard is valuable for my main game plan. And it incidentally hits graveyards. And Dawn Hand Dissident can also be used as graveyard hate, which is another one of those where in a pinch, it's not ideal, but I've used Dawn Hand Dissident to completely stuff Kaveru, which I think a lot of people don't realize that's an option, but it is. The style card from a graveyard, it can be any card, any graveyard. So if your opponent wants to pull something out of their own graveyard or out of their graveyard in a way that would be devastating, like with a Zombify style effect, you can just say nope. With this, you might have to sacrifice the Dissident in the process, but you can do it. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, be aware of what your main game plan is. Find the tools, and have a backup game plan, but not a divergent one. Yeah, make sure whatever you're using. And I think the fact that we're looking at all these different graveyard tools and they're all doing such different things really speaks to the fact that like you can probably find a tool that will give you whatever you need in the matchup that also synergizes with your game plan. So find those and use those. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, sick. Cool. So we were talking about the Pro Tour, but we got a really sick tangent. I enjoyed that very much. Were there any other decks or like games that you want to talk about?
From the Pro Tour particularly, no, but I would encourage you all. There was another like pretty major event over the weekend. Alongside of the Pro Tour, the Magic Online actually hosted a standard regional championship super qualifier, and there were over 200 players in that event. Holy cow. It matters. It's a larger scale event. Also, top two decks were Dimir Excruciator and Blue-White or Azorius Control. But I would encourage y'all to take a look at the top 8 of that tournament, because they are actually 8 different archetypes in the top 8 of that event.
What?
So it's, if sometimes folks make the argument like the Pro Tour is like too specific because pros trying to play like the best decks and they're trying to tune their decks against what they believe the enemy is, so on and so forth. And I would greatly encourage people to check out this other 200 player event, because it would agree with the idea that the format is diverse and healthy. I'm typically someone who, if it was like a very small tournament, like the Arena Championship, you've probably heard me say this before, Arena Championship event that's like only so many players, like when it's 30 or 50 players, and I'm like, this is not indicative of the format. I think it was the last standard one anyway, where it was like 50% were VV decks. Well, obviously 30 some people in the event, 20, they all want to win the tournament. You got world championship seats on the line. Sure, I'm playing the best deck as possible.
Of course. Yeah.
And not saying that the folks in the Pro Tour don't. Obviously, there's World Championship seats. There's requalifying for the Pro Tour. The RC Super Qualifier and Magic Online qualifying you for Pro Tour and or RC seats. So it's super important. Big events, you're playing for things that matter. So to see in multiple events there be a diverse, healthy metagame is good to see. So, I would encourage you to check out some of these other results. And I would also guarantee you that, RCQs that are happening, worldwide, that they are also diverse, because everybody is going to realize that they can play many different archetypes and come prepared for said archetypes. It will have the trickle down effect, until, who knows, maybe Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles changes things up in 4 weeks. Who knows? I don't know. Who knows? But I will tell you that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pre-release is in fact 4 weeks from now. I'm not kidding. It really is, because the streamer event is the last Wednesday in February. That's when we get to play with the cards early on Arena, for y'all to see, and then the pre-release is that weekend. And also, there is Spotlight Series Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the weekend after, which is a standard Spotlight Series in Richmond, Virginia.
Mm.
So you hopefully, if the Magic sets keep doing what they've been doing, your currently printed standard set might have its own deck archetype associated with it. Avatar with allies and the infinite combo,
Hmm.
Lorwyn Eclipsed and elementals, for example. Um, I think it's pretty clear that Wizards of the Coast design or play design is seemingly making deck archetypes out of each new set. One, to
Hmm.
bring people into playing standard, and two, saying, okay, well, if you are just hopping into the format, like now is the time. Here, buy the Lorwyn cards, buy into the Elementals deck, or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Hey, you can do this with the brand new set entering. I think that's particularly healthy, um, from a new player perspective. So, 4 weeks, maybe new standard.
Maybe.
Let's enjoy
So
our diversity now. Yeah.
yeah, indeed. Well, hopefully this tightrope that they're walking of introducing new archetypes that are like relevant but not totally like upending things. Hopefully that can keep happening. Um, unless we find ourselves in a standard that's like that poor cabbage cart where we just look at it and it was so good until
Right.
the most recent thing just smashed into it. Um, although, fingers crossed, I'm hopeful that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is going to make Genova Ancient Calamity playable finally. Um, I'm hopeful because it has a line of text: whenever a mutant you control dies during your turn, you draw cards equal
Uh
to its
huh.
power. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is going to have a lot of cards in it that are mutants. So
Now,
I'm
now,
hopeful.
do you think that they templated this card, understanding that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is going to have mutants in it, and that the Marvel set would probably have mutants in it? Because, and granted, I have never played the Final Fantasy games,
Hmm.
so I don't know what the correlation between Genova in the game is with mutants, or something that's templated for future sets.
Right. So with there were a couple of there. I Short answer, yes. I fully suspect they knew more mutants were coming when they made this card, because like right now, Genova Ancient Calamity is like stone unplayable because like what
Yeah.
mutants do we have in standard? It's like we have Zidane from Final Fantasy IX and like Kuja, I think, are mutants, but like they're different
Right.
colors and they don't quite line up. Like it's very awkward.
Right.
So certainly not worth it. But and actually, I did at a recent event chatted with some of the designers actually, and apparently Square was actually very insistent that Zidane be typed as a mutant. Like they wanted that
Hmm.
represented in Zidane's type line. That wasn't a mechanic. It's because of the lore of the character.
Right.
That was actually something they were pretty like apparently relatively adamant about. Like that was something they genuinely wanted, and
Hmm.
so that was an opportunity to create, to also align Genova's impact on the people who had Genova cells in them. Calling
I see.
them choosing to represent those as mutants, I think was intentional given the synergies that we're going to see. When we talk
Gotcha.
about designing for a 3-year standard, I think that's exactly what this was. Yeah, at least I hope so. But yeah, Genova Ancient Calamity. I'm not saying buy them all up now, but like
You
she's
you
gonna get
never
better.
know.
Yeah.
Spend $2 and buy a playset, and the worst case scenario, you're out $2,
Right? Exactly. And you got a
right?
couple bookmarks, sure. Like it's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Oh man. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that makes sense.
right? Yeah. So yeah, more on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as we go. Although to be fair, we now have a whole bunch of spoilers for that as well,
Jeez.
because we had a situation. And I have to confess, I have not actually looked through the Ninja Turtle cards much because they literally dropped at the same time as Lorwyn.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because for folks who haven't heard, during the pre-release, some folks were opening the pre-release kits and getting promos that literally were from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And
Hmm.
so, like, they literally just accidentally packaged Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cards into the pre-release kits for Lorwyn. Um, I'm curious, did you open any of these during any
I
of your
did
pre-releases?
not.
Okay.
I did not. And what was interesting is what I can tell you that happened at the pre-release at my LGS, a comic book store. There were
Hmm.
multiple kits that were opened with 0 promos, and multiple kits that were
Oh,
open with 2 promos. So I think the promo issue was more than just random Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles going in. those
Okay.
packaging. So like there was a mess up on colossal scale there. Like
Gotcha.
we have occasionally seen kits that have had 2 promos in the past, but like you're
Sure.
talking we might have gone like many sets without that. But
Right.
there were a few kits every pre-release that had double promos, more double promos than no promos.
Mm.
But never we never found any Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cards.
Okay.
Um, but it was so much of a problem that they had to put out the card image gallery for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it shows all the rares and mythics that are in the main set.
Yep.
Because there was just so many that were put out there. Um, Purposefully, I also haven't looked at them
Mm-hmm.
because one and this and listen, I actually am somebody who's pro Universes Beyond. You all are welcome to your opinions. I like the way
Right.
that it brings new people into Magic. That's pro number one. But let me know in the comments if you disagree. Totally fine.
100%.
But I purposely am not looking at the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles till preview season would normally begin because I want to enjoy Lorwyn for what is Lorwyn. Um, so sometimes I get folks like in Discord that come into the stream and say, "Did you see this card?" I'm like, "No, I didn't. I will see it when the time comes, but I'm here enjoying my
Yeah.
goblins and my fairies, and I'm having a good old time in Lorwyn Eclipsed." And in 2.5 weeks, so 1.5 weeks before the set actually drops, and we start designing new standard decks, then we'll get to talking about the new cards.
I love it.
But we're gonna enjoy standard for what it is right now.
I really dig that, and I'm with you on that. I've had a lot of people tell me that I think I've heard the new Krang is something I would be into, and I'm looking forward to checking it out. But I haven't. I
Sure.
have yet to read it. Like
Yeah.
yes, and it's same deal. And it's not necessarily out of any kind of. In the past, I know I've definitely been like big on the like, oh, don't look at leaks, you guys, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of done banging that drum if I'm honest. And
Yeah.
this was one of those where like Wizards has released it, that it's open, it's out, it is
Yep.
what it is. Which a classy move on their part to just accept it,
Hmm.
like, well, all right, they're out in the wild, it is, we can't deny it, it is what it is. But yeah, just Lorwyn is great, and let's enjoy it. Like we're not gonna have enough
Hmm.
time on it anyway, so let's
Right.
enjoy the time we have. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't even know. We'll get to eventually talking about it, but there is I don't know if it's a shortened timeline. I think it is another shortened timeline between what will be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Strixhaven,
Mm-hmm.
because it's 6 weeks after Lorwyn, or 7 weeks or something,
Yeah.
between the two, because trying to fit 3 standard sets in 4 months is just naturally what's going to happen before you get to the
Yeah.
normal release schedule. So yeah, if you think it was a short time that we're experiencing now between Lorwyn, between Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Strixhaven will be the same.
Yep.
Um, then there's also the issue of them pushing sets back to put a set where it didn't belong in the original release schedule, and how those cards will interact with each other. That's what I'm still waiting to figure out.
And
Um,
I've actually heard that there's some of the issues with promos as it relates to pre-release kits, and like while the stamp's not there, and maybe some of these other kerfuffles has something to do with Lorwyn originally being slated for a 2025 release and being pushed into 26. I wonder if
it
there is
has to
something to be
be,
said for
right?
that, right? Yeah,
It. I mean, that
because
explains it.
the stamp on the card has always had the year, or well, not it previously had a date, a specific date, and they wanted to change
Yeah.
that so they had some more flexibility. Which okay, whatever, but they had the year on it. And so Lorwyn getting bumped, any promos that had been designed and gone through QA and all that jazz with the 2025 stamp on them wouldn't have been accurate anymore. So maybe some of those were printed and have been destroyed or whatever. I have no idea. Presumably not, because they probably
Yeah.
got out ahead of that. But I'm sure there were design documents and like the uncut sheet files, whatever those look like. I'm sure had the stamps on them or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, um, I suspect a last minute change was part of that kerfuffle. Yeah, interesting stuff. Cool. Well, this has been a heavy one. There's been a lot of fun discussion. I gotta say, this Pro Tour in general was delightful, and it feels like Standard's just in a good place right now. So
Hmm.
it's high powered, it's fast, but it is diverse. So
Yep.
sick. But yeah, Carlo, thanks
Yeah.
so much for taking the time today. I really do appreciate it, man. Always a pleasure.
Oh yeah. It's always good to yap.
All right, absolutely. Any final thoughts that they want to leave the folks with before we bring it in for landing?
No final thoughts. Just enjoy standard. Enjoy your games. lots of stuff are going to be coming out very, very fast in the upcoming months.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in terms of like events and stuff, I mentioned I'm going to Spotlight Eclipsed. So if anybody is going to be in Toronto this upcoming weekend, it'll be my first time in Canada, so come say hello. I do have a meet and greet on Friday from 12:30, I think, till 2 in the Creator Zone. So
Heck
you can
yeah.
come say hello, and I will be milling about playing games. But I am playing in the main event, and I'm looking forward to jamming some Lorwyn Limited because it's been a very fun limited format for me to play, which I'm excited because I'm mostly the standard guy. So like showing up at a limited table is like, oh, this is me. But I've been watching a lot of Headology Magic and
Beautiful.
you know, a lot of just Lola Man and trying to figure out this format and you know what cards are probably better to pick and draft than others. So check them out if you haven't already, our fellow Janksters. And
Absolutely.
you know, I'll be interested to hear DeFore's thought process because DeFore just played in the Pro Tour and did
Mm-hmm.
fairly well. And you know, part of that is limited, and I consider DeFore a limited master, so I'd be
Absolutely.
interested to hear from him how he feels about this limited format.
Definitely.
So yeah, looking forward to that. And then I think after that, the next event is the Spotlight Series Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Richmond before we start getting into MagicCon season.
Heck yeah. So what archetypes are you hoping to open? Like what if you could pick?
Personally, if I could get some really good elves, that would be great. Elves have a lot in terms of power level and removal in this set. And you need to avoid the giants because there's this one giant that's a rare. I think it's a 3/7. I forget its name, but it's 5 mana. It's a rare, and it reanimates a creature with mana value 3 or less by removing a -1/-1 counter on end step. So you can't blight onto it to kill it because then you enable them to keep reanimating their things. I learned that very quickly in the pre-release, and I've played a
That's
couple
so
drafts
funny.
where that has occurred, and I'm like, yeah, giants aren't a main creature type in Lorwyn in terms of
Yup.
like the dedication to them, but yes, that's it. Slumbering
Slumbering Walker.
Walker.
Yeah.
Nope, screw this card.
Brutal.
I just assume when it hits the battlefield, I am dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty gnarly. Yeah. Well, and good call on the elves. I know I'm in the same spot. I've found in my drafts, like when I even if it's a little bit of a force, even if it's not quite great, if I can get
Hmm.
the elf deck together, I'm having a good time. Gloom Ripper's a hell of a drug.
Yes.
Good luck getting one of these, because yeah, it's a good time.
That card is amazing. Also, I've had like some luck splitting like elves and goblins. If you're
Okay.
playing like black base strategy, if you get like a lot of the black goblins together with the Golgari elves, they're just
Mm-hmm.
really powerful together. Where I find like the red cards are like kind of lackluster in this set personally for me. If you're not on elementals, but yeah,
Right. Yeah, I've seen that too. Yeah, good stuff. Rock on, man. Well, yeah. Thanks so much for making the time, dear listeners, dear viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in. We do appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, do all the things, and yeah, we'll catch you back next week. All right, later, everybody.
later.